All right, everyone, we're about to get started. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. We're really excited to again provide this webinar to everyone, and then we'll follow up with any additional requests as needed as we go through the whole presentation. But today we're going to talk about planning for college, steps for success, and I am lucky enough to be joined by Dominic Liata of Liata College Consulting. And he's going to walk through the presentation with us, and we're going to touch on his expertise throughout the program so that everyone can really hear from a true expert who is, lives this every day. Dom is a guidance counselor, a teacher, as well as a coach, and also runs his own college consulting firm, which helps students navigate the college admission process. So we're really excited to have him aboard, and we'll go through the presentation with his expert guidance. So my name is Dan Sharkey. I'm the CFP and Senior Relationship Manager here at 12 Points. I've been in this industry for about 15 years, handling all types of private wealth matters, from investing to relationship management, and then, of course, helping families through the college process. There's my ugly mug. We won't spend too much time on that. The far better looking gentleman who's joining us, Dom, as I mentioned. He's been a director of guidance for nearly 2 decades, in addition to being both a teacher and coach. He's had an undergraduate degree from West Virginia, and also 2 master's degrees in administration and college counseling. He is also the president of the Bergen County Board of Directors of Guidance. In addition to running Liata College Consulting, he's got 2 kids of his own, so he couldn't be happier to have him aboard. So, Dom, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
All right, so we're just going to lay out a brief agenda. We'll get more into Dom's expertise as we get through the program, but we're going to talk first about a little bit about finances, the real cost of education, and then really getting through the college admission process and what parents should be thinking about, what your kids should be thinking about, and how we can all navigate the process together, because the finances and the admission process has gotten far more complicated than it was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I was going through the process. Kind of hard to believe that I'm saying it was 20 years ago, but unfortunately that is the case. So we'll get through all those different topics to see what, how many different areas that we can cover. So starting first, we're going to talk a little bit about each of the types of saving plans that you can utilize as a parent to help plan for your child's path to success and ultimately to fund their college tuition. We're going to talk a little bit about exactly what college is going to cost and the different scales that you should be thinking about, but we want to first start with exactly what you could be doing to save for college here. So the most popular of these versions is what's called a 529 plan. And a 529 plan is simply a tax-advantaged education savings plan offered by your state to incentivize you to save for college. Now, very similar to your 401k plan or your IRA, the plan grows tax deferred. In addition, if you ultimately use those dollars to pay for college, you will see that they will actually be completely tax free. So as long as those expenses go for a qualified education expense, all of those benefits will be tax free to you. Now, a couple of key points to remember: you do not have to use the plan that's offered by your state. For example, we as a firm, we always use the state of Utah, which is my529.org. But you can get a variety of other state plans. My best recommendation would be to research each state plan, see, depending on where you live, see what the benefits are, and then ultimately what you should utilize for your child. It's a really great way to save for college, depending upon how long they have until they will actually enroll. The portfolio mix of assets and stocks and bonds that you can utilize can change. So it's a really great way to go ahead and save for college. And remember, here's the benefit: all that growth, all those dividends, all that interest, all the appreciation of those assets will then be tax deferred if utilized for college expenses. Now, additionally, due to some recent legislative changes, you can also use these for private high school. So it's a great way for you to save for future education expenses. Additionally, if you have multiple kids, you can use it for any of your children. Let's say, for example, your oldest daughter gets a full scholarship or goes to a military academy. Well, those dollars can then be passed downstream to be used for your other kids. So it's really a tremendous way to save. So just here's a little bit of the breakdown between kind of prepaid tuition and a college savings plan. Prepaid tuition, you'll see it in a lot of states, allows you to lock in a rate at today's dollars for future benefit. Now, there are some discrepancies between those two, some differences. You would have to, from the tuition costs, for a college savings plan, there's no lock on tuition. Or prepaid tuition, you set a rate now for in the future. Prepaid tuition only includes tuition. So that would be, you're going to exclude books, you're going to exclude room and board, which also have, tend to be growing exponentially year over year. The plan contributions, for a prepaid tuition, you pay up a lump sum or installment payments, whereas for a college savings plan, you're able to contribute up to the annual gift limits, which currently is about $15,000 per person per child. The plan guarantees, there are none for a college savings plan, but you do have greater flexibility. For prepaid tuition, the plans are often guaranteed, but again, dependent upon state. Dominic's in New Jersey. We're obviously doing this from Massachusetts, so you really have to understand whatever state you're in, what the offerings actually are. So it's a very good way to kind of get a balance on what is on what your options are, but really understanding the finer details is critical. You can also utilize what's called a Coverdale Education Savings Account. This is another type of education savings plan, and with far stricter limits than a 529. 529s have eclipsed Coverdale's as really the go-to plan in these scenarios, but this is also an option for you. What you'll see here on the screen is the contribution limits, $2,000 per student. So the limits are significantly lower compared to $15,000 per beneficiary on the 529 side. There are also some income limits. If you make more than $220,000, this would not be an option for you, and that's filing joint as a family. So really understand that gifts, but 529, generally speaking, is a far greater and more flexible tool to be able to use than Coverdale's. A key component here, financial aid. Regardless of what you do, you always need to ensure that you're completing financial aid, even if you don't expect to get any aid. Regardless of income or the ability to cover costs, these forms are critical. And I've also included here the MEFA, which is the Massachusetts Education Financing Authority, if you live in the state of Massachusetts. If you're joining us from out of state, be sure to check what your state will require. A key point, and I'll bring in Dom here in a second to give us his view on this. Other resources that you can utilize, whether it be religious organizations, fields of interest. I know in the state of Massachusetts, just because that's where we're located, the Francis We Met Scholarship, which I personally was a beneficiary of, for anyone who works in the golf industry, offers scholarships. The other activities that make you unique. If you like playing chess, if you like playing baseball, if you're on the debate team, your counselor's office can be a great resource to identifying, some of those options. So, Dom, let me just ask you, as you're advising people going through the discovery process, how do you have them think about what aid is out there and how they can actually reach some of those interest scholarships that are often overlooked when they're going through the process?
Dan, I'm going to dovetail off of basically what you've kind of touched on in the first part of your presentation, is you're given a lot of options. And that's the key element to this whole thing. If you don't remember anything that I say, anything else that I say, the one thing you want out of this college application process are options and choices. So the college application process starts, for all intents and purposes, starts freshman year. But students don't really get into the bulk of it until junior year during their junior year of high school. And that starts, you're looking at February of their junior year. Students do not have to make a decision on anything until the following year. So what you want when you start this process in junior year, and when you finish it in senior year, spring of senior year, are just options. Say, okay, Dan, we got accepted to 5 or 6 schools. Okay, this one has got this program. This one's got this program. This one's offering this amount of money. This one's offering this amount of money. So at the end of the line, you have 3 or 4 different options from a financial aid basis that you can choose from. Because it's really, it's going to be really tough for you to tell me that the business program at Rutgers, the business program at West Virginia University, the business program at University of Delaware, or the business program at the University of South Carolina are that drastically different. But if Rutgers,
that's a great point you're making right now, and that actually, we'll just keep that thought. So I just want to jump to the next slide and allow you to finish talking, because what you're seeing here is exactly what Dominic's talking about, and that is the cost of all these different schools on an annual basis. So please continue, because what I think will be startling to people is hearing it from your perspective about the quality of the education, and then comparing it to the prices that they can actually look at from an annual cost of tuition standpoint.
Exactly. From an out-of-state, University of Delaware. Okay, if I'm a New Jersey resident, I'm looking at University of Delaware. I'm looking at close to almost $60,000. Rutgers, I'm going to pay $30,000. You can't tell me that the education I'm going to get at Delaware is $30,000 better than the education I'm going to get at Rutgers. Okay, but the cost is going to be $30,000 more.
Absolutely.
So we want to give the students those options to look at in spring of their senior year. Say, okay, I got accepted to these programs. Okay, I'm only have to pay $30,000 to go to Rutgers, and whatever money I save, I can go for my MBA or use it at the next level for an additional degree.
It's an amazing point to really focus on, and what I think we can all attest, both having lived the process ourselves and having done it with your children, if you're over a certain age, of that sometimes emotions get in the way. But what from a financial perspective, and I really want to caution everyone that the rate that you pay has to have some seat at the table. The explosion in tuition rates over the last, probably going back almost 30 years now, have been exponential. And really thinking about the type of education you're getting, what you hope to do in the future, and the school selection based upon the financial impact it's going to have for you is critically important. And with that same thought, let's look at kind of what the true cost of borrowing is. So what you saw on this slide right now is what that red line shows you what, when you adjust for interest and you adjust for if you have to borrow. Now, look, a lot of these questions really go to if people have to borrow money, right? If you can afford to pay this out of pocket, then this may not be as applicable to you. But in your example, if you go to the University of Delaware, let's just use that as a public out-of-state versus a public in-state. Over the course of your debt service, you're going to pay almost an additional $100,000, and that's, some of these numbers are averages, right? I mean, just comparing to your in-state rate versus your out-of-state rate for wherever you live has become critical to really understanding what the true cost is versus what you're looking at from a quality and education standpoint.
Exactly.
Another thing that I find really interesting, and perhaps Tom, you have some thought on this as well, is never overlook the options that are available. You heard Dom talk earlier about options, but there are several programs that exist, and I'll just speak from the state of Massachusetts. If you go to the University of Vermont, for example, to study a program that is not offered at UMass, you pay in-state tuition. So it's critical, as Don was pointing out, to not only have options, but to really understand what it is that you're signing up for. Because just looking at this chart here with that red line to show you the true cost of borrowing versus what's on the paper, that really highlights to people what life is going to look like when they're actually repaying these dollars for the next 2 decades after they graduate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's the bottom line with this is what bang are you going to get for your buck? I mean, I'll use myself for an example. I went to West Virginia University. I majored in with a degree in English. When I first started teaching, there was a teacher next to me who graduated from Yale. He taught English also, but his Shakespeare was exactly like my Shakespeare, okay? But he paid 3 times the amount of money that I paid for it. So it depends on again, if you're going to a degree, you're going to pursue, like Dan said, you pursue a career in education. As long as you're getting a good, solid education and you're making the most out of it, you're going to do fine. I mean, again, going to Harvard Business School or UPenn, I mean, that makes a big difference when you're going to that realm.
Right.
So I think that also comes into play when deciding on how much money you're willing to pay. Will the dividends you pay, will you reap the dividends from that education?
Right. No, and
teacher salary or not.
Right. And a conversation that we always have, and using education is as a profession is a perfect example, because the what you're going to ultimately end up teaching is not going to change all that drastically. Now obviously you still have to ensure that you're going to an accredited school and a school that really offers a quality program, but cost has to play in. So we'll talk more about this in a little bit. But what we have all our parents do, and I talk to a lot of kids directly, because it's important to bring them into the conversation, and we'll make sure that we address that later in the presentation. But having that conversation with them early, what's it likely going to cost? What do you plan to do when you're done? Where do you plan to live? How much is rent going to be? What's your debt service ultimately likely to look like? Understanding those numbers now is critical to actually being able to make an informed decision. Because in the example that you just used, the teacher literally in the classroom next door who went to Yale. Now, no one is going to dispute the quality of a Yale education, but it's in a professional field that has a income stratosphere that is relatively defined already. And it's not just important to look about just the first year after you graduate, but what is the run rate or the likelihood of you being able to repay yourself that over time? So going through that exercise as a student, say, okay, look, I want to major in business, so perhaps going to Harvard makes more sense. But if you really want to be a teacher and you're going to commit your life to working with kids, taking on that extra $50,000, $60,000, $100,000, $200,000 worth of debt may ultimately not be worth it. There's an example, Dom, that we've actually worked on in the past that is really helpful. Someone who was offered a full scholarship to an institution that I won't name, but it was a very highly esteemed and qualified institution that has excellent academic pedigree. They instead chose to go pay full freight to a school that didn't have a similar financial aid package. Now, the debt that you're going to absorb from making that type of decision is really going to, in my mind, haunt you for a significant period of time for no tangible benefit in terms of the output and the quality of your education. So always important to think about as you're actually making this decision. Okay, so now again, the process is more than the application. So Dom, when you're thinking about the college process and not only determining how to pay for it, but determining how you actually navigate your way through this process, what are some of the key things? And we have some of the points here, but what are some of the key things that kids should be thinking about as they enter, into a rising junior, rising senior part of high school?
Again, it really does come down with the options and the choices. We want students to apply to between 10 to 12 schools, 3 or 4 schools that are reaches, 3 or 4 schools that are targets, and then 3 or 4 schools that are likely. And taking into consideration the fit of the school. Okay, I would not, again, when we talk about the fit, where the student is going to be most successful, I would not have been comfortable at the fit of Harvard. Hence, I went to West Virginia. But you're looking at the fit and the student's ability to be successful at an institution. Okay, I've had students who've come to me during their junior year and they say, all right, Mr. Guyot, I want to go to a big school, major in English in California. And they wind up at a small school in New Jersey, majoring in business. Because they are high school juniors. And they don't know what they don't know. So as part of that option process, when you're looking at senior year, you have a couple schools that are bigger, a couple schools that are smaller, a little closer, a couple that are farther away. And then you look at the financial aid packages, and that all comes into consideration. You shouldn't feel like you're forced to make a decision in May of junior year.
Right.
You want options, choice on the table for when you become a senior.
Right.
That's all we're really looking for.
How has the common application changed from the traditional way kids have applied to school? Have they removed a lot of the common barriers that have previously existed, so that are you seeing kids apply to more and more schools these days compared to years past?
Absolutely. I mean, with the common application, as Dan stated, students can check off, a bunch of boxes. Once you fill out the application, you check off a bunch of boxes. You can apply to 800 different schools with the check of a box. You have to pay for them all, but it makes it that much easier. But again, that's part of it also, that you want to do some of your homework early on. Applications running anywhere from $80 to $100 per application. So you're looking at $1,500 easy just on application fees, not including sending your SAT scores and ACT scores,
Right.
which is you're going to add another couple hundred on top of that. So this process, you want to approach it in a way that you approach it in a smart fashion.
Right. No, and what's really interesting, and I would love for you to use the example. We used this the last time we delivered this presentation, but I find it absolutely fascinating when we think about the PR and the expense that goes into not only applying to schools but actually attending. And that's the case of, to use for a local example, of Boston College versus a Bucknell. So can you talk a little bit about how schools with a bigger name pedigree have an advantage, and how students can kind of use that as an arbitrage opportunity to find tremendous value, get an excellent education, but perhaps at a school that's not as well known from a notoriety perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Boston College, upper tier school, it's a sub-Ivy. They're looking at average of 1450, 1500 SAT scores, GPA 3.9, 4.0 on a scale, and then Bucknell is still incredibly competitive. But if I'm that student who is on that cusp to get into Boston College, okay, Boston College's gift to me is letting me come to Boston College and pay $75,000. That's gonna be their gift. Right. But you got a school like Bucknell, phenomenal programs, okay, phenomenal alumni outreach. But Bucknell, they're going to be more, because I'm above the average of what Bucknell is looking for because of my SAT score and GPA. Bucknell's going to say, you know what? We really want you, Dom. So here's 25, here's 30, here's $40,000.
Right.
And going back to what are we going to do with our education? What are we going to do with our education? What major are we going to look into? And the overall experience of going to Bucknell and having those opportunities in front of me and being wanted and being made to feel like I belong there. That all takes into the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the correlation you see to schools that, for example, have very good football programs, or in the years in which they have a very good record, you see these huge application spikes. So just being thoughtful and really eliciting some guidance from professionals like yourself. And we'll talk more about periodic college consulting. We'll have all of Dom's contact information for anyone who has any follow-up questions. But really being thoughtful about what you're looking for and having those options, as you say, but without going overboard. I mean, we hear sometimes parents come to us and say, well, my son applied to 22 colleges. At that point, you're just kind of throwing darts at the wall, and you're not really being thoughtful about what you want. You perhaps haven't asked those really, really hard questions. But again, the key thing is really be mindful of what you're looking for. Really expand your horizon to include options that may not be visible at the very forefront, or may not be at the top of your mind. And then again, give tuition a seat at the table. I can't emphasize how important that is, because you're going to find schools that fall into the same exact academic stratosphere. They check all the same boxes, and one's going to cost $80,000 and one's going to cost $30,000. And that difference is life changing. That's essentially a vacation house that you don't actually get to live in. So it's really important to consider that. So this is right up your alley, and again, talking about options. But walk us through for any of the parents who have kids who are entering high school, or who are really freshmen and sophomore. What are the key things they should be thinking about as they're starting their college process? And then I'll touch a little bit on how parents should think about their finances as they go through the same process with their children.
Yeah, the bottom line with this process, okay, is don't make it too complex. Early on in the high school career, freshman and sophomore year, you're concerned about one thing: grades, grades, and grades. Right. That's all you need to worry about. If a student is getting good grades, okay, one, they're going to be prepared for the SATs and ACTs. So you don't have to go overboard with the SATs and ACTs, because the way the mathematics and English is taught in the classroom, that will translate to the SATs and ACTs. The student's getting A's and B's in math and English, he's going to do all on the SATs and on the ACTs. The second part of that is that grades translate into money. From an academic standpoint, colleges want students, we're going to reward the students with those grants and with scholarships based on their academic achievement. Right. And so if students are performing in the classroom, they're really setting themselves up, and they're opening up the options that they will have junior and senior year. You can't go backwards and fix a GPA. You can add clubs and sports, and if you don't have a good SAT score, you can take the SAT in junior, senior year. But that junior year, that GPA is the most important aspect when we talk about the college process. Now that many colleges are going test optional, it's even more important. So there's nothing more important. Okay, if you remember nothing else about the application process and about how the college process works, it all comes down to the grades. That's where we need to start. It translates into everything else.
It's really interesting to me how easily people can get distracted from that kind of fairly basic point. And it seems very self-evident, but with so much more noise in the process now, the ability to apply to so many other schools, that so many different things that go into the college education process, it's very easy to lose sight of something as basic, as simple as ensuring that you have good grades. And I would even say that we've had parents who have come in which, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, in which the SAT is now being waived or not being factored in. I believe the University of Vermont most recently was one that has seen that, which has seen a tremendous uptick in applications, which makes that GPA even more important. So it's really interesting that can get lost, but it's a critical point to remember that the GPA not only helps you in your school selection, but also in the financial aid package, which together provides a far more seamless process than it would if you were lacking in that there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and taking those AP and honors classes for a couple of reasons. One, they look great on a transcript. They inflate the GPA because most classes, their 8 honors or APs they give it a weighted GPA, right. So it inflates the GPA. But it also, and it's another thing that again we lose sight of. Students are taking AP and honors classes, the AP and advanced placement, the college level class, are more prepared and have more success in college. Right. And so even if I'd rather see you get a B in an honors and AP class than get an A in a college prep class. And colleges rather see you do that also. They want to see you challenge yourself. Yeah. So people get so hung up on the grade, but they lose sight of, is their son or daughter actually learning? Yep. But the grades are where colleges start, are really looking. That's where they're locked into.
And just from a financial perspective, if you can get 3, 6, potentially 9, some cases 12, if you're really a special and advanced and gifted student, that is real dollars that you're going to put back in your pocket in terms of tuition that you are not going to have to pay when you actually get to college. So those AP classes are so important, and so not only from your ability to project as an applicant, but also from a financial perspective and how you can potentially save those dollars as you go through the process. And just to comment a bit on, as you're a parent, because if you're a parent, you're going through this process as well. One thing we want you to do from a financial planning perspective is not only just understand the tuition, but it's critical for you as the parent to understand how your son or daughter's choices are going to impact you personally. Are you going to have to co-sign for the loan? Newsflash, the answer is yes. What does that do to your retirement plan? What does that do to your financial situation? Everyone, as Dom and I are both parents, we both have 2 boys apiece. We completely understand the desire to do everything humanly possible for your kids. But part of that is having an honest conversation with them about what this is going to cost, having them understand what their debt is going to look like when they graduate, and don't shield them from that conversation. We have seen so many people create a situation in which they didn't really understand what they were signing up for, because parents, with their best intentions, did not fully disclose to them what they were actually looking for. The other thing I would say is, we recently had this conversation with a client, and it's critically important. When you're discussing with your kids about how to make these choices, not only give money a seat at the table in terms of what the tuition is likely to cost, but also spend some time talking about what a future career is likely to look like. Money for money's sake is not worth much. It's only worth it for the things that truly bring you joy. And you're currently, Dom and myself, Dom's committed his life to working with kids in his school, and that provides a certain financial framework to what you're likely to work with. but understanding what that framework is and understanding what you're likely to earn when you actually get through college, having those conversations now is critically important. And so Dom, I'm curious from your perspective, when kids come in to your office to talk about what the next phase is, how does deciding on a career, how do you see students going through that process, and what do you think separates those who you think are doing it well versus those who don't really have the right concept of what to consider when deciding on a major and going through that college process?
With my school where I work and part of what I do with Cleota College Consulting is I help students find out what they're looking for. I take them through certain programs, and we try to narrow down a career, even if it comes down to the idea of finding things you don't want to do. Right. So, for example, I started out as a pharmacy major. When I went to West Virginia University, I started as a pharmacy major, then I was business, then I was history, and I finished with a degree in English. Right. Okay, I had no idea what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. Now, if you know anything about the human brain, one side is math, science, the other side is humanities and English. I started with pharmacy on one side of the brain and finished on the other side. So I wasn't even close. Right. If I had a little more direction, a little more guidance, and someone asked me the right questions, or I had a little more guidance while I was in high school, say, hey, why don't you take a chemistry class, or why don't you take a pharmacology class, or another science class, and see if it's something you like to do. I would have figured out, you know what? Because that's what happened. When I got to West Virginia, I took organic chemistry, it blew my head off. So the idea of discovering, if I would have known that before I went to college, I would have saved my parents thousands of dollars.
Right.
So so that's what the high school process is about, is just taking different classes, using this exploration process, the opportunity to take different electives. In my school, we offer over 100 different electives for students, so students can dip their toe. But if a student does go in undecided, and the majority of students will go to college undecided, if you're attending a college or part of the fit that we're looking at, is at West Virginia, me changing my major wasn't really a big deal. It was a big school, had tons of majors, so it really wasn't a real challenge for me to change my major from one to the next. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to a smaller school and they don't have those vast options, and all of a sudden you have to transfer, and that becomes another financial burden.
Right.
So you really want to take time with this process and have students they don't have to commit in junior year, but explore a couple of different majors, or a school that has a bunch of them, put that on the table for the fit for when we talk about senior year. Okay, we got 5 or 6 schools, we're offering this amount of money, these types of majors, and these are the options we have to choose from. So again, it's all about trying to delay that decision making as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And for those listening who are in the state of Massachusetts, I'll give you a perfect example of school fit like you're referring to, and really understanding what you're signing up for is so critical. Bentley University, which is right up the road here in Waltham. My wife is a Bentley grad, and that place is a job placement machine. I'm at last count, the number of graduating seniors who had found full-time employment in their field of study was above 98%. I believe. Actually, it may have been even above 99%. But it's business focused. Going to Bentley at whatever it is, $58,000 a year to study English, like you said, is not a great fit, nor is it a best use from an efficiency standpoint about how to stretch dollar if you want to do something other than business. But if you're in that mode and you want to do business, you couldn't find a better place to go to school. So it's, again, fit is critically important, and giving yourself some optionality is also is great if you don't know exactly what you want to do. All right, so this has been the historical college decision flow chart. You plan for college, we do all the things, your GPA is good, you identify where you want to go, whether it's based on the academics or the football team. I'll just abstain from my opinion on that because perhaps in a younger life, I didn't make those decisions in the right order, but it all worked out. You apply, you determine the cost, you get a bill, and then you attend. Well, I want to just propose a kind of rejiggering how you can think about the college decision process. So you identify the schools that you want to go to, taking all the things into consideration that Don was mentioning: fit, location, majors that are offered, financial aid, all those kind of things. And then I want you to ask yourself one question. Can you pay without debt? If the answer is yes, great. Then you can stop thinking you can either accept decline or go somewhere else. But if the answer is no, I think there's a whole other decision process that you have to go through. What is your loan burden going to be? As parents, this is something I just touched on. What is the impact on you? Understanding how your plans are going to change. How are you going to support your student or child in that event that they can't pay for it themselves? How does your career timeline then change if it does? What's the impact on the student? How much debt are they going to have? How long are they going to have to be paying off this debt? And what field of study have they chosen? And whether or not that college tuition then becomes quote unquote worth it. And then and Tom, you see this every day with hundreds of students. This is the part where it usually breaks down. A lot of times people do the first three steps. They think about how this is going to affect me, how it's going to affect the kids, what the learn bonus is going to be, but they never get to the point of reconsidering what the alternatives may be. And it's at that stage is so critical, because that's where the examples of, well, I kind of want to go to a school like BC, but there's this Bucknell option that I haven't really thought through. That is the point where I see most people kind of hit a little bit of a speed bump. So it's critically important from my perspective, from the financial perspective, to revisit and reconsider what your alternatives are going to be. The line that everyone says, and Dom, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that, well, Susie or Johnny has their heart set on fill in the blank. And that's like the dagger to my financial planner's heart, because I know that means that there's going to be a significant loan coming for that student to attend that university, probably for the wrong reasons. So reconsidering what your alternatives are is a critical step that I think a lot of students don't actually do.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. I mean, as a parent, sometimes it's tough to say no. It really is.
Right.
But we know better than they do. They don't know what they don't know. They don't understand. They don't understand how much $50,000 or $60,000 a year actually is.
Right.
So I think you have to coach them, like you said, having that conversation, having that dialogue with them, how much this money is, how much this is going to cost, and what this is going to look like for them at the end of the line is really important to have.
Right. No, and that brings us to the last slide before we get to questions, is that it's not just about finances. And how do you avoid the pitfall? So, and I'll turn it over to you in 1 second to kind of give your closing thought as your kids are applying to school. But from a financial perspective, you must involve your kids in the process. They need to fully understand and appreciate the implications of their decisions, as do you. And that's when I hear people, I'm going to borrow from my retirement savings, I'm going to do it. You must understand the implications of those decisions. And if you have not done the legwork, and it's not fun, we're not going to sugarcoat it, but if you've not done the legwork, you will not be as well off in the end. So involve your kids in the process and plan early, really understanding early on what this is likely to do, and getting your ducks in a row, and having your kids, as Dom really harped on earlier, and it's an important point, plan early, but focus on what actually matters. And that's where it's easy to lose sight of grades when all these other external forces are impacting you. But if you plan early and you focus on the right things, you'll be in much better shape. The true cost of attendance. The true cost of attendance is not what they advertise on their website. I promise you this. And some of the numbers on their website are appalling enough. But when you actually take books, how is your kid going to get to school? Are they going to get on a plane, a train, or are you driving them? If they're driving it, or are they driving themselves? They have to have a car. All of those other things meaningfully impact the ability for you to continue to pay. You're going to have to pay for plane tickets for each holiday. All of those things matter, and they should all be calculated. And also, too, if you do have to borrow money and you're trying to figure out how can I piece this together, always try to think of borrowing the least amount possible. If I can afford to pay the plane tickets and the books and the room and board outside of borrowing money, that's the way to go. It's a safe assumption to say anything you borrow, you will spend. We've seen a lot of people come in with ideas that they borrow quote unquote extra just to have a buffer. I promise you that extra does not get not spent. So make sure you can really calculate the true cost of attendance. Seek alternatives. Finding there is tons and tons of value that is hidden. we keep using the example of Bucknell, but there's all those Pennsylvania schools, Lehigh, Lafayette, all really quality education. The alumni network is a huge underlooked and underappreciated component of this. What is the job placement rate? Those are all valid questions that you need to understand, and seeking alternatives to those that are just popular. If you look at an example like Clemson, when I was applying to school, Clemson wasn't very good at football. Their applications were probably not that big of a deal. Now they've become one of the most sought after schools on earth to go to. Yep. And it's tied to one thing, and that is the success on Saturday. So seeing schools in a different light than what you see on your TV on Saturday afternoons is critically important. And this is where I'll turn it over to you. Seeking professional help for both financing and preparation questions. And Don, what do you see as the biggest shortcoming that people inevitably fall into as they're going through this process? Or I should say even a list of shortcomings if there's more than one that is most prominent.
I think the biggest thing I see is that people start thinking about this process too late. And I'm sure you see that all the time from your side as far as a financial perspective. Oh my God, college is right around the corner. When the first thing I say to when I'm meeting with a new student or talking to a new family about the college application process, we start talking. The first thing I talk about is the grades. That's where everything starts. And then inevitably, the student will always say, "I wish I would have known this sooner." I'm like, I'm sure somewhere along the line it was said to you 25 times that you need to focus on the grades. And don't make too much of this. The other shortcomings, people try to make this process more complex than it has to be. They think colleges want well-rounded students, so they get involved in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different clubs and activities. When you put that all on a resume, you think, wow, look at my resume. I've got a little of this, a little of that, and I got 10 different clubs. Colleges read right through that. I'd rather see a student with good, solid grades, involved in 1 or 2 sports, 1 or 2 clubs, show some leadership, and that's it. Because I'd rather see the depth of something as opposed to the breadth. I want to see a student heavily involved in something than just dabbling in a few things. So the big thing is just really focusing on the grades, giving yourself some options for later on in life. For later on in the high school process, okay? and really approaching the high school process as a journey that along the way, students are figuring out, A, what they want to do with their lives, taking classes, B, getting involved in different clubs and in different activities that are going to enrich them and make them stronger students, taking challenging classes so they are prepared for college. College is not the end game, okay? It's the end game for some people, but we all know because, like you said before, you touched on it's 20 years since you've been out of college, okay? It doesn't matter really at this point where you are in your career, where you went to college.
Right.
College is just the end game for right now. But the end game is beyond. And Dan, a lot of things that Dan is talking about as far as setting themselves up from a financial perspective beyond and from a career perspective beyond high school, beyond college, is really the mindset and the thinking process that really has to go into this. You can't be short-sighted when you come about this process.
No.
If you have any questions, honestly, just, again, if you want to set up a Zoom or a phone call with me for an hour, I'd be more than happy to kind of walk you through and just give you some basic information about how to go about this process, things you're doing right and things you're doing wrong, or things you kind of need to think of. I'd be more than happy. Dan is a great friend of mine. I've known for such a long time. And so anyone who reached out to me with Dan's card is a friend in my book.
Well, and thank you for saying that. And so everyone on the screen, the website is www.collegeconsulting.com. And please go there for any questions that you may have. Obviously, contact me. We have a couple questions. So Chris asked, can these slides be distributed? Yep, Chris, no problem. We will send those to you. No issue at all. And you mentioned, like I said, we've known each other a long time, and it is amazing how much things have changed in just that time period. And one of the questions that I always get, and one of the questions we have that came through, was kind of when is the right time to start? And I can't tell you how many times I get a call, whether it's from someone that has pointed them my way from you or whoever else, and they say so and so just got into and has accepted to go somewhere. How do I pay for it? If you are asking yourself that question, you are very much behind the 8 ball. That type of question needs to be asked far sooner in the process. And that doesn't mean that the answer needs to change. But it is critically important for you to understand the implication of checking that box that says, yes, I will attend, before you actually get to that point. And another question that came through that is really interesting that I want to touch on briefly, because I have kind of some direct experience with this one, and then Tom, I'd love to get your thoughts, is that it said, how should my son or daughter go about thinking about what to major in if they don't actually know what they want to do? So what I would tell you is, and you were talking to someone, I was a history major, Don was an English major, as he mentioned, and we obviously ended up in far different career paths. But don't discount the humanities entirely. There are so many bridge programs. I got my MBA at Harvard, but there are so many other ways to go about getting the quote unquote training if your major happens to be something that's more business or finance or management related later on. The quality of the humanities education, whether it's philosophy, English, history, don't scoff at that avenue, but know that there's probably some additional work that you have to do in conjunction with or after you graduate to kind of get back on an even playing field. But just be thoughtful about when you actually decide to make that choice. The tuition has to play a role. If you're going to spend $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to be an English major, and then you really have to, just giving money is seat at the table. So Don, what do you tell kids who don't really know what they want to do, or may have some doubts about the arts and sciences compared to doing something more formal, such as accounting, for example?
Yeah, people think you have to, like you said, Dan, very few of us really, start off, and finish where we actually start.
Right.
Life is not a straight line. It's very circuitous. So what I try to get students to think about is at least try to think about things you don't want to do. Do you see yourself being you like fixing things? Do you want to be an engineer? Do you like reading? Do you like working with people? Working through doing a career inventory, or that you can develop, because most careers, people are successful at their careers based on their personality. And if you're a shy, introverted person, you're not going to be doing something that you're doing or something that I'm doing. It's not something that really is germane to that type of personality. So part of it is a self-reflection of who you are as a person. I think starting off in that broad steps, like, do you like talking to people? No. Then if you don't like talking to people, there's probably about 25 or 30 jobs right off the bat that you're not going to be successful at, or you're not going to want to do.
Yeah.
So I think people try to think of all these different jobs out there, but if you start really taking stock of yourself and with things, your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, of course, these things can change over, the way we are at 18 is not the way we are at 35. Right. But I think students start to think through this part of the process of who they are, what they're interested in. They're a lot closer than they think.
Yep.
In discovering.
Right. No, absolutely. And one last thing I would say, because we also get a lot of questions about this, and that's about apprenticeships and trade schools and things like that. Be mindful, if your kid likes to work with their hands or do something else beside the quote unquote traditional, I'm using air quotes now, the traditional route of going to college. College has, from a financial perspective, has gotten so expensive that you really do need to consider whether or not it is worth it for you as opposed to doing something else. When you look at the benefits of going into the trades, just be mindful that college is not for everyone. And that's why it's important to take all these things that we've talked about today, to what you hope to do, what you don't like to do, the total cost of attendance, all of those things are really important. And I encourage parents, again, if you can begin that dialogue early, you're more likely to get to a really good place at the end than if you just wing it and hope for the best. So really having a plan, both financial and education, is really what I see as the ultimate key to success.
Absolutely. Okay,
so it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and Dom, thank you again for your wisdom and guidance. I've known Dom for a very, very long time, and he's the best at what he does. So as you can see on the screen, www.gliadacollegeconsulting.com for any other questions. We'll distribute the slides, and if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to email me. It's dan@12points.com, and we'll be sure to include that in the follow-up. So, Dom, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dan. Good seeing you. Take care, buddy.